What's driving the current interest in auditing and compliance is that the perceived risk associated with data protection breaches has increased. Across Europe, initially the data protection authorities took an informative approach, so what they were trying to do was inform data controllers of their responsibilities. But in most cases, the data protection laws have now been in place for around 10 years, so regulators are taking the view that people should know it now and it can't be ignored any longer, and they're taking a more enforcement-driven approach, which means that data controllers have to comply with their data protection responsibilities or they risk fines or other penalties. Are the risks the same across Europe? In answer to that, the Data Protection Directive was introduced to harmonise the European data protection laws, but in practice there are differences between the approaches taken by European data protection authorities. So, for example, some take a very hard line, some less so. The general trend is that data protection authorities are taking a harder line and increasing penalties. Just to give some specific examples, in the UK last year the Information Commissioner's penalties were increased from £5,000 to £500,000 for breaches of the Data Protection Act. In France, the CNIL, which is the data protection authority there, takes a more investigative approach and is more likely to conduct dawn raids, which it does very proactively, on data controllers that it feels aren't quite in compliance with the law. A different approach again is taken in Spain, which is the AEPD, which is feared as probably the strictest regulator in Europe, which is very, very proactive in the way that it fines data controllers that are in breach of the law. So if you look at a typical month, the Data Protection Authority in Spain might issue tens of fines for substantial sums of money. And the last example is perhaps in Germany, where people who have breached data protection law have actually found themselves in prison. So that just gives a flavour for the different approaches taken by the data protection authorities. So a company that breaches data protection laws risks fines and imprisonment, but also reputational damage, which is emerging as a very significant risk. So, for example, what we've seen recently in the entertainment giant Sony's case in Japan is that the share price took a nosedive when the details of the data breach were released onto the news. Not complying with the law affects companies located both inside and outside Europe. So typically where there's a global multinational organisation, it might have European offices. These will be subject to the data protection laws. And of course, if data is transferred out of Europe to, say, the United States, the US company is also implicated. Both its subsidiaries in Europe or branch offices, and also there might be direct action or investigations by a regulator. So companies can avoid these risks by, first of all, conducting a data protection audit. So what that means is looking to see what data protection processing activities they have in place and their compliance measures. And once they've got this, they can take stock of their data processing activities. So an audit isn't a once and for all fix. The typical multinational needs to change to survive, so it'll be making acquisitions and disposals. It'll also be introducing new systems and new ways of doing things and perhaps new lines of business. And all of these have got a data protection aspect to them, or may well have. So companies need to be undertaking audits on an ongoing basis to make sure they're compliant with the law if they want to stay out of trouble.